Hello, this is Catherine Veneman, Curator of Education at the Blaffer Art Museum. Welcome. Join us virtually at the Blaffer for Summer Art 2021. This is a series of 4 family-friendly art making demonstrations and workshops that we're going to be hosting in conjunction with our 2 exhibitions. We'll be using mixed media and easily obtainable materials to create works in the style and themes of the 2 artists. The workshops will be presented by artist and educator and docent Rona Lesser. All of the lesson plans will be also available online. Today's lesson, Let's Weave, Design with Paper and Paper Quilting, is inspired by the exhibition Jamal Cyrus, The End of My Beginning. Now I will turn you over to Rona Lesser, who will guide you through today's activity.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to collage and design a paper weaving. So you need some paper, some markers or crayons, scissors, glue, lots of glue, and newspaper or magazine articles. So for the newspaper or magazine articles, I tried to go with a theme. And you don't have to. Maybe you just have a favorite magazine that you really like, that you actually still get in paper version at home. Maybe you get the newspaper and you want to do something about something that's been in the news a lot. In this case, I was thinking of health, but you could do something with kids, more kid-centered, with animals or travel or foods for your subject. We are going to take, and I've done partial samples, we're going to take either a piece of colored, 2 pieces of colored paper, or cardstock like this. This is just plain cardstock. This is colored paper. And we're going to use those and cover them with pieces from the articles. And I started to do that. On one side, we're going to do that. On the other sheet of paper, we are going to draw patterns. So you're going to fill the whole piece with that. So one side of each can be the newspaper or magazine. I don't know if you can see this. This is a strip from my sample. And one side is that. And one side is covered with the pattern drawings. Now, paper weaving is a little hard for little bitty children. If you have really young children, you might just choose to do it as a glue project and tearing up the strips of paper or magazine and put them on both sides and just do it as a visual piece without the weaving. And it'll be a lot of fun that way too. So let me go ahead and start showing you. I'm going to glue a little bit more down so we have enough to actually do the weaving. And I didn't choose just the one newspaper or magazine. I'm doing both. Gives you a little bit more color that way, since magazine print is often colored pages, and the others are just print. So I'm going pretty fast, just so we can get something covered here. So like this. The other side, I would draw, either cover it with more or draw like this. I'm actually right now, I'm not even worrying about what the words and things are, just because I want to get this done for you quickly. I was thinking something with animals or environment would be a really good subject for families and kids, because they know a lot about those things. So you might want to think about a subject like that. And that kind of subject is really easy to find a lot on. If it's overflowing here, I'm just going to tear it off or cut it off. I actually like tearing a lot because you get the rough edges. And it kind of makes for more patterns and interest than just putting the flat things on there. All right, let's see, I saw something over here. Interesting. It might not fit, but I'll make it fit. I actually didn't even go all in one direction. So I've kind of glued something on all over this piece, okay? And I use the cardstock for this piece. Ideally, you're gonna let it dry a little bit, maybe while you do some patterns and glue the other piece. Patterns can be anything. I use markers just because most people have markers at home, but you could do anything. Some of my markers have been around too long and they're going in the trash as I use them. So we're going to fill at least one side of the page quickly with a few more patterns. Patterns are great for kids to learn too. It's part of learning math and reading skills. You could pattern with letters and numbers. Just something interesting so it looks like a very patterned woven piece of cloth. And ideally the other side would already have the articles on it. So this is where it gets a little more complicated. To do the weaving, when you weave, there's like a warp and a weft, and sometimes I forget which is one because I'm not a weaver, but we have to create that. So we're going to take whichever piece you want to. I'm going to use the heavier one so that we have a heavy framework, so the one on cardstock. And I am going to fold it in half. And the kids call this hamburger style. I learned that from the kids, teaching the kids, okay? So I'm going to fold it in half hamburger style. And then I'm going to take, you don't really need to do this with a ruler, but on the top, I'm going to mark a line about an inch down so I know where to stop my cut. So now I've got this line going across there. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I am going to cut up to that line. And that's what we're going to weave into. So I'm getting the other part of it to weave into. So it might have been a little bit easier if you're working with the kids to cut the actual colored paper one rather than this one, because this is really thick. Hopefully it's not going to stick together that way. And then I'm going to open it up And that's gonna, it kind of looks like a lantern that kids sometimes make out of paper. But we're gonna weave into that. It would be a little easier to do the weaving if this was dry, but okay. On the sample one, instead of leaving the bottom together, I cut all the way down so I'd have a fringe. And that's an option you can do. So when you weave, the part that is hard for the kids besides the actual weaving, and I've usually had success starting with kids about age 7 weaving, but you can do it younger with a little help, is the fact that you're going to have to do one strip over and one strip under. So I'm going to take the other sheet of paper, and because we're going across this way horizontally, I'm going to cut strips. And they don't have to be all the same width, size, or width. Some can be fatter, some can be skinnier. Like I said, ideally, this would have the newspaper on the other side too. Then I'm going to take this, and I think I might actually cut the bottom all the way down to make it a little easier to weave into for me, especially since this is wet. So I'm just going to go on the bottom and cut the rest of it through. It's probably easier to see it on the back. So that I have an open bottom instead of weaving into a closed one. That's going to leave the fringe pattern on the bottom. Okay, so it looks like this. And then I'm going to start weaving. That one didn't quite. Deciding whether I'm going to go over the first one or under. So we'll go under. And then the next one we go over. And then under. And over the next strip. And under. Over. Under. Whoops, it popped. Started to pop up a little bit. Over, under. Push it up to the top. And then you can do the next one. The next one has to be the opposite. And this is where the kids have a little bit of problem. So if they started with it under, like this one did, then this time I'm going to start with it over and go under the next one. If you're having trouble with the ends slipping out, you can start gluing the ends. Oh, right, so it starts to look like this. Now, if I had had the newspaper and the patterns on the back of my paper, it wouldn't look, the back wouldn't look blank like this, and I could have a double-sided piece of art that you could hang. It would look more like this on the back. This one has blank because I did not put the newspaper on one of the backs. So the front has the weaving of both the newspaper cut up and the patterns I drew for variety. But we would just continue to do this. Take a little glue as you're going maybe and glue down the ends so that they stay where you want them. Because they slip out really easily. I did a little water in my glue just to make it easier to use with a brush. And that'll hold it down as you're going. So you just got to keep doing that until you get down toward the bottom. If you really wanted to not just use papers, and we're using papers mostly so that we're using the idea of using the newspaper or magazine articles like he did to associate more with it, with his artwork. But paper weaving can be done, or fabric or scraps. You could use fabric scraps. You could use pieces of yarn in between, all kinds of things to make it more interesting. I'm just going to glue that one down. Now, see, I goofed. I didn't pay attention and I did it the same way. So I haven't glued it yet, so I can just take it out and restart. That one went over under there. So now I've got to go over, and I started it the wrong way. If you make a little bit of a mistake, it's not that much. Plus, you can always take it out before you glue it. So you can see that you're not actually going to see what the articles were about when you're finished, but you're going to have a very interesting piece of work with lots of pattern and texture created, which are concepts of art. Fabric art is a very big in the art world right now too. So I could keep doing this. If you have a younger child, I'm going to suggest that you do an alternative with, and I had one I had started. Oh, I think I used it. Where you just take the pictures and articles and start putting them on a sheet like this. You could also have them cover some patterns and use them in between. So just for fun, I will just show you what I would do with that. Okay. Happen to have a nature-oriented thing here. I'm just going to tear out, since this is nature, this is probably not going to be as much print as some color. It says bird tails. That'd be good. And they don't have to be this big then. I can make them smaller strips, smaller little pieces, and different shapes next to each other. You might have to glue a little bit, tear a little bit more, do a little bit more of the cutting to do it this way. To get different size pieces to go next to each other. I think I want some long strips, some narrow and long, some fat. So it looks a little bit more interesting. I haven't glued this yet, so I will glue it so you can see what I'm doing. If I wanted to intersperse this with the patterns, I could cut some of the patterns out. Just have your kid, even a little bitty child likes to scribble with a marker, and you can just scribble some things and help them tear them and add those in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do this so you can see what I'm doing. So this is an alternate way to do it, do a similar project with a younger child. You're not actually weaving, but you're going to get an effect that looks a little bit like his artwork. And you've taken a subject that maybe they're interested in. I would use some print, just it makes a nice variety. Some pictures. And before you glue it down, if your child is patient enough, a lot of times they want to start gluing right away. You can actually make sure that you like the way it looks before you glue it down, that you have some variety. Tear this one out. This one down here. And this would create something similar, not really a weaving, but a similar pattern piece. And will be a lot simpler for a child. However, if you've got somebody who can handle this, it's really a good skill to learn. If you want to make it a little interesting on the top, I would take, just to hold it together, I would take one of the patterns, cut it, and glue it as a top piece. So it looks like it has a little border to it. You could probably, if you've got a good hole puncher, you could punch some holes and hang it as a weaving. You can see that I took one of the strips and I made it across the top to make a little bit more of a finished product. And I could punch some holes and put a string to hang it like a weaving. On the bottom, when I'm finished, if I want it more fringed, and I have time to just do a couple more, probably. Let's see, that one was over, under. You can have the kids say over and under, and that way, when you're working with them, that would keep them a little bit more on target. It is a lot easier when the bottom is open, I think, to weave it, because you can always just glue the ends in to keep it in. Then glue down your ends so that it stays when you're finished. And then you could on the bottom, this one didn't get quite in the right spot. I could, oops. I could go ahead and fringe it even more and make a real fringe so it's like this. So it looks like a fabric hanging down. So this would be finished on the front. And if I had done the back would be finished like the other piece I did, where both sides have weaving on them. If you want to do something that's a little bit similar to what I did with the paper, just putting down the paper, and you happen to have a lot of fabric scraps, it's fun to do it with fabric, and then it becomes a little bit more like one of his other pieces in our exhibit that you can see when you come and visit. So I hope you will come and actually visit the exhibit and see all the wonderful pieces. He also has a lot of pieces that have to do with music, and we're going to work on something on that in our next lesson. Thank you for joining us, and please come back next week for this next lesson.